Shabbat Shalom. You can close your prayer books for a few moments. As you may or may not know, tomorrow night marks the beginning of a new Hebrew month, the month of Elul. Hannah, this is why you get to have a bat mitzvah on Sunday, because it is Rosh Chodesh, the beginning of a new Jewish month. And the month of Elul is a particularly significant one for us in the Jewish community. It is the month when our tradition leans in close to us to whisper, pay attention. To pay attention to our lives, our choices, our relationships, to our souls. It's the month of Cheshbon HaNefesh, of taking stock, of accounting, not just for what we do, but for who we are. And so the topic I'd like to reflect on with you tonight is one that, at least in our modern Western culture, we often speak about in the negative, not in the positive. And that topic is regret. It's a word and an idea with which many people, if we're honest, are not comfortable. And in fact, a strong ideology has developed around its rejection, falling under the you only live once YOLO idea. This notion of living with no regrets has achieved elevated and desirable status across otherwise notably diverse sectors of society over the last century or so. As Daniel Pink noted in his book on regret a few years ago, it's little wonder that this simple maxim transcends political and cultural divides. The Reverend Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, Christian, conservative, mentor to Republican presidents, urged his followers to drop the very word regret from their vocabularies. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Jewish, liberal, appointee to Democratic presidents, concurred. Waste no time on regret, she counseled in her 2016 book, My Own Words. Jazz legend Ella Fitzgerald recorded a song called No Regrets in 1968, as did country star Emmylou Harris in 1989 and rapper Eminem in 2020. Some people endorse this worldview so deeply that they tattoo the two-word credo, no regrets, on their bodies. It is the second most used phrase for tattoos in America. Fun research on that one. Our culture admires what it sees as the bravado behind living a life with no regrets, as it often portrays regret as a character flaw or weakness, something that keeps us locked in the past, that prevents presence or forward motion. The poet David White puts it this way: regret is a rarity and almost never heard except where the speaker insists that they have none, that they are brave and forward-looking and could not possibly imagine their life in any other way than the way that it is. Can you relate to this? How many of you have heard someone reflect in their life that they have no regrets? Or have you said as much yourself? I know when I was much younger, in my college age years, I used to think that way. Why regret anything? Aren't the missteps we take what make us who we are? Yet honest, deeper reflection on our instinct to live with no regrets can reveal something about our motivation to make such a claim that we otherwise might not have recognized, or that we actually might be trying to avoid. As sociologist Brené Brown notes, no regrets doesn't mean living with courage. It means living without reflection. To live without regret is to believe you have nothing to learn, no amends to make, and no opportunity to be braver with and in your life. So we might consider reframing how we understand regret, not as weakness, but as honesty. And wouldn't you know it, this idea of regret sits at the very heart of Jewish practice at this time of year, and in many ways, it serves as the first, most foundational step in the process of teshuvah, repentance, repair, and return, which is the invitation, whether we want it or not, of the High Holy Days. To regret is to recognize that we are human, that sometimes we miss the mark, sometimes we hurt one another, sometimes we let fear guide our choices, sometimes we let life pass us by. But from a Jewish vantage, regret is not about shame, it's about awareness. It's the soul saying, I could have been more, but also I can still be and want to be more. Regret is actually the vehicle that makes conscious personal change possible. I have shared with you on a number of occasions in these sermons, if you come at the high holidays or at this time of year, my own struggles and regrets, in particular when it comes to my issues with anger. I am not a patient person, and I used to lose my temper regularly, in particular when my children were young, for all sorts of reasons, some that made sense, most that did not. I was brought into deep awareness about my problem when, while looking at one of my children's faces while I was screaming, I could see heartbreak in their eyes. Has anything like that ever happened to you? I regretted it immediately and profoundly. And in that moment, I promised myself that I would try to change. I think I've made some positive strides in this work, but in order to not slip backwards, I have to be vigilant in my own self-awareness. And I consciously hold on to the regret I still experience from that moment as my motivator to continue my work. It is not easy for me, but I do the work. And I would not be able to do it if it were not for the gift that my regret offers to me. In English, the etymology of the word regret is fascinating and informative. Re, you likely know what that means, again, back, renew. And gret, which means two things. One, to lament or grieve, but the other, to greet. So regret means not just to grieve again, but to greet again. We might see it as greeting our grief, presumably at that which we regret, again. And embedded then in that greeting is the idea that there must be some greater purpose or function of revisiting the things we wish we had or hadn't done. And notably, we can look to the Hebrew of the word regret to reveal exactly what purpose regret has for us. We first see the word regret appear in the book of Genesis after human beings have turned to violence and corruption in the story of Noah and the ark. The text reads, Vayinachem Adonai, God regretted creating humankind, and God's heart was saddened. That word, the root of it, nacham, is really fascinating. Sometimes it means literal regret, as here, but a bit later, the same word appears when Isaac mourns his mother Sarah, and the Torah says he takes comfort, vayinachem, through Rebekah's love. And then even later in the book of Exodus, after the golden calf, the Torah reads that God, vayinachem, changes course, turns away from the punishment that God had planned. So which is it? Regret? Comfort? Change? The answer is yes. To regret is to grieve what was, to feel the ache of what cannot be undone. But it is also to be comforted, because regret tells us that we care, that our hearts are still tender. And regret in our tradition is also the seed of change, the possibility that tomorrow can be lived differently than yesterday. The great Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik taught that it is critical we not release our missteps to the confines of the past, but rather that we strive to remember them with intention, because it's the memory, the sting of those missteps, of our regrets, that awakens us to the power within us to change. Daniel Pink puts it this way: we need the ability to regret our poor decisions, to feel bad about them, precisely so we can improve those decisions in the future. If we know what we truly regret, we then know what we truly value. Regret, that maddening, perplexing, and undeniably real emotion, points the way to a life well lived. Think about that. Our regrets are not random, and they do not keep us stuck somewhere in yesteryear. They anchor us in the present with the best of who we are, and can point us toward actions we can choose to take in the future that align to the best of who we want and can yet be. If I regret words spoken in anger, it reveals that I value kindness, and I can strive to be more kind. If I regret not calling a friend, it reveals that I value connection, and I can work to reach out more. If I regret playing it safe instead of being bold, it reveals that I value courage, and I can direct myself toward taking more risks. Regret clarifies what our hearts hold sacred. It's not our enemy, it's our teacher. It's an opening, it's a door to teshuvah and return, to repair, to come home to whom we truly are. So this Elul and season of returning, let's each take seriously the invitation to reflect on what we regret. And let's commit to face whatever that is, not with shame, but with strength, with the courage to return, to make amends, to begin again. Regret isn't the end of the story. In Elul, it's the beginning of a better one. Shabbat Shalom.